1 year ago, I made my first soap, and it might possibly be the ugliest soap ever. I've learned a lot since then, and it's now time to conquer my worst soap ever and make it my best. And you'll really want to stick around until the end of the video because this soap is cursed and intent on not being remade. It's a tall order, so let's get to it. Before I show you my puzzling excuse for a bar of soap, I'm going to throw up a drawing of what I was trying to do. I wanted my soap to reflect my fragrance of choice, which was grape soda, so I went with a dark purple base with a lighter purple foam on top, as well as some clear melt and pour ice cubes and a straw. Pretty simple design, totally doable in theory, but reality is far less forgiving. This is the result. I still have a few bars lying around because, surprisingly, nobody wanted them.
They were also free. I'm just gonna throw that out there.
So let me break down what went wrong. First off, I'm very well aware that the soap is not the color I wanted. Did I intend for it to look like gravy? Not really. The reason it isn't purple is because of poor judgment on my part. I used an ultramarine purple, which looked gorgeous when it was in the soap, but then as soon as I added the grape soda fragrance, it transmogrified into this scrumptious beige color. Next, let's talk about these blood specks. Those were, at some point in time, a nice purple glitter, and they transformed during the curing process. And last, these sewer water melt and pour ice cubes got all sweaty and made the soap cry brown teardrops. Why they turned brown? I don't know. The only good thing about the soap is the smell. Even after a year, the smell is stuck and it smells so grapey and delicious. Let's go make a new one. Grape Pop Soap 2.0. That's a Grape Pop isn't Grape Pop without that quintessential artificial grape, so I'm gonna source a new fragrance oil that quenches. I'm also saying no to melt and pour ice chunks because those induce trauma, and I'm keeping the paper straw because otherwise nobody would know it's a drink. The belly of the bar will be a nice dark royal purple, and the top is gonna be a nice light royal lavender. On top, I'm gonna go simpler, just a purple and silver mica dusting, maybe some glitter. It depends how stressed I am. I've replaced those melt and pour chunks with bubbles that I'm gonna try to make with a new bottle technique I learned. Will it work? Probably not, but at least I tried. Lastly, a Grape Pop soap isn't a Grape Pop soap without Grape Pop, so I'm gonna blend real Grape Pop into this soap. Grape Pop, enter stage right. If you live in the US or Canada, then this is probably the Grape Pop that you're most familiar with.
Or raisin pop, I guess.
Since I'm experimenting with a caustic substance today, I want to know what's inside this stuff. So if we take a look, the first ingredient is carbonated water. No surprise, but I want to make sure the pop goes flat before I use it because the carbonic acid could be a bit of a problem. Next ingredient is sugar. That's going to help with the soap lather, make it nice and bubbly. Citric acid is next, and to my surprise, it's actually a popular additive in soap because being an acid, it reacts with some of the lye to make water and sodium citrate byproducts. The amount of citric acid in this pop is negligible, so I don't need to adjust my lye. Natural and artificial flavoring. These are proprietary, so I have no idea what they are. I'm not a food scientist, so take my superficial research with a grain of sugar, but sodium benzoate is used in the food industry as a preservative and is sometimes added to soap for the exact same purpose. Perfect. Lastly, we have our two dyes, Amaranth and Brilliant Blue FCF. Amaranth is a vibrant red-orange dye that is banned in the US for being a suspected carcinogen, but has the green light in Canada because we have free healthcare. Brilliant Blue FCF is a beautiful lapis color and is combined with the amaranth to get the gorgeous teeth-staining purple hue that Grape Pop is known for. I'm a little nervous about the dyes because food dyes aren't necessarily the most stable when it comes to harsh environments, so I have no idea how they'll behave in my highly basic lye water solution. Hopefully it stays purple, lest I repeat my ugly soap all over again. It's been years since I've had a Grape Pop. Let me give it a taste. Sweet. To prepare my two colorants, I'm measuring out some titanium dioxide for my lavender color. I'm using measuring spoons for two reasons. One, conscientiousness, and two, consistency. For the purple, I'm using Majestic Violet from Voyageur Soap and Candle. Is it not just like the perfect grape color? Not too much blue, not too much red, just mwah. Half a teaspoon of that for the lavender, and then I'm measuring 1.5 teaspoons for the darker portion. I'm really worried about discoloration here, so I want that purple as vibrant as possible. That purple needs a bit of shadow, so I'm gonna add some black onyx mica at 1/4 teaspoon. I stopped living life dangerously, and instead of blending the micas with extra oil, I'm now borrowing from my oil blend. I know, I think I might be having an identity crisis. I'm just gonna blendify with my swirly twirly. The lavender wasn't light enough, so I dumped some more TD in there. The dark purple also wasn't dark enough, so I added some more majestic violet and black onyx to that as well. I recorded myself mixing up the lye water solution because I anticipated some sort of color change. This is just a mix of water and Grape Pop in both solid and liquid form. Now, as I'm mixing it, you can see the purple dye slowly fading away to an ugly rust color, and then eventually it comes a vibrant, juicy scarlet color. And the reason for this is because the brilliant blue dye interacts with the highly basic environment as well as the sugars in the pop to become basically invisible. So all that's left behind to see is that lovely red amaranth dye. Now in theory, if I shook this lye water solution to incorporate some oxygen, the brilliant blue dye would oxidize and the color would return, making the solution temporarily purple. Neat! Let's make our soap. The orange skin-eaty liquid goes into the yellow skin-slimy liquid, and then the two get blendified. I'm playing this portion real time just to show how quickly a small batch like this comes to trace. It really only takes a few seconds. Now, something you want to look out for is something called false trace, which usually happens if you're soaping cooler like I am. It might appear that your batter has come to trace, but after a couple of minutes it starts to separate again. This is a quarter batch with around 400 grams of oils or 14.5 ounces, so it only takes a few seconds to come to trace. I'm going to separate 420 grams of my batter to make the dark purple portion, and this is the only part of the batter I'm going to add my fragrance to, and I'll explain why in a minute. The fragrance I'm using is Galactic Grape by Wholesale Supplies Plus. I'm going to add 25 grams. According to WSP's testing, this fragrance discolors to yellow over time, which isn't ideal because that'll likely change my lovely purple to a deep maroon over time. I've made sure to add extra purple colorant to combat this, and I've made the decision to add the fragrance only to the darker portion of the batter. Since the lighter portion is, lighter, I fear the yellow discoloration would appear more prominent there. I'm not torn up by it because this grape is a beast, like grape Jolly Ranchers. I need this portion to be a bit thicker, so I'm going to blendify just a bit more. The purple is looking good so far, no discoloration. Now this is the part where my last soap turned that ugly gravy color, so I'm keeping my toes crossed. I've made a cardboard cutout in the shape of bubbly pop foam, and I'm going to rake this gently back and forth across the top of the soap to try and get the design on that cardboard cutout. This is exactly what I did for my gingerbread soap, and I love the effect that it made, so if you want a successful implementation of this technique, hop over to that video. I'm really not sure what the problem was this time. My batter was either too thin or my cutout was too detailed and ambitious. This part was, for lack of a better term, unproductive. I just took a popsicle stick to try and fake some of that bubble texture. I was really disappointed because the bubbles were, to me, one of the most important parts of this soap, and I really wanted to get them to look right, but we'll see how it looks when the soap is cut. Chin up. Now I'm going to prepare the rest of my batter with my lavender colorant. As I was mixing it, I realized I should have probably doubled the colorant. The soap batter is already pretty yellow to begin with, and it totally muted a lot of that purple color. To get the look of those lavender colored bubbles dispersed throughout the soap, I'm going to try a bottle technique for the first time on camera because practicing is for people who know what they're doing. This is a squeeze bottle I picked up from Michael's, originally for doing drip cakes, but I don't really make those anymore, so now it'll be used for soap bubbles. I plugged the neck with some plastic wrap because I'm using a small amount of batter for this technique, and if I use the squeeze bottle as is, 95% of the soap batter would just stick to the walls. So yay for proactivity! I'm blocking the camera's view with my bottle because I don't want you to witness the terror of how badly I'm performing this technique. Basically, I just have the nozzle about a centimeter or two below the surface of the dark purple batter, and I'm squeezing ever so gently while moving the bottle from one end of the loaf to the other. Hopefully that makes a bubble. The dark purple batter was too thick and didn't refill itself once I injected the bubbles, and in my panic, I neglected to cover up my injection trails with that dark purple batter, meaning my bubbles will look less like bubbles in the cut soap and more like wandering entrails. One of my problems with this technique is I felt the nozzle couldn't go deep enough. It easily could have been 1 or 2 inches longer. Take that as you will. I waited for the top to become poison pudding so I could texture it with a spoon to make the top look all swishy swashy. Lastly, to top the soap, I'm dusting some of that majestic purple mica to illustrate what color the soap could have been, as well as some super sparkle mica to add that nice bubble pop sparkle. A gentle sprinkle of silver stardust biodegradable glitter from the Good Glitter, and then finally, the paper straws. I couldn't decide if I wanted to use green or blue straws for this, so I decided to use both. At last, my Grape Soap 2.0 must sleep and saponify. 48 hours later, the soap has woken up and is ready to be cut. I'm a little nervous to see how the soap turned out, because if it's a failure, I don't know what I'm gonna do with myself. I'll just have to sit in the corner and weep. If you ask me what the soap was supposed to resemble, I couldn't tell you because I wouldn't know. This is unequivocally exactly how I wanted it to look. Yeah, the bubbles turned into tentacles and the purple color is pretty dull. I just wanted it to look like Barney. I'll be honest, I'm pretty bummed out about the soap. Once again, the curse of the grape lives on. To be fair, my expectations were high. I was asking a lot from the soap. Here's the OG grape, and here's the 4K remaster. I like the straw. All joking aside, there is a clear improvement, I'll give myself that. The new soap is actually purple, and there are no crying melt and pour ice chunks, and the smell is very better, but it could be better. I'm gonna try again. This time I blended just until emulsion. I separated a larger portion of batter for my darker purple, used 1 teaspoon of Neon House Party purple powder in addition to half a teaspoon Majestic Violet to make the purple that Barney would be proud of. I poured Barney into the mold and then I remembered that I actually needed it only half full, so I Control-Z'd until the mold was half empty. I prepared my lighter purple with a 1/4 teaspoon titanium dioxide soup and a 1/4 teaspoon of that neon purple and added only enough to get the shade that I wanted, which honestly looked like melted blueberry cheesecake. I gave my squeeze bottle a DIY extension made out of an amputated pipette, which gives me a couple more inches. Carefully, I squeezed a little line of light purple down the middle and another further down and closer to the edge of the bar. I topped it off with the rest of my dark purple, jiggle bounced the top smooth, and made some larger bubbles by squeezing tighter and slowing down. My cardboard cutout design basically dictates where these bubbles are going because I need them to be low enough so that they don't get scraped away by the cardboard. I modified my cutout just a bit. It's the same bubble design, except I put some arms on the top that will ride the length of the top of the soap mold as I scrape my batter away, ensuring that the sculpt is clean and consistent. And because I knew I would be scraping away batter, I increased my recipe by 15% to accommodate for the loss. Now that my bubbles are soaped in, I can pour the rest of my light purple on top. Because the batter was just at emulsion when I divided it, this light purple is nice and runny, and hopefully isn't crushing my beautiful design and instead is crushing it. I then set my oven to 77 degrees Celsius, as low as it can go, because I want the soap to gel so the colors pop and so that I can cut it sooner. The loaf stays in the oven for an hour, then I turn off the heat and let it rest in there until room temperature. 8 hours later, let's see how it looks. Okay, we have some results. First soap looking sharp as always. Second soap, almost there. It's funny because the color of the foam for both of the soaps is identical. Don't know how that happened. And finally, I have a Grape Pop soap I'm happy with. That Barney color is exactly what I was going for, and the foam is a much better color. My cardboard cutout design stuck for the most part, and while I have some work to do with those bubble things, they've graduated from being tentacles, so I'm happy. Gelling the soap was also a good call because the purple is so much more vibrant and translucent. I'll show you some of that extra purple batter I had that I didn't gel, and you can see that there's a notable difference. I'll be doing that method more in the future. Let's look at the product shots. I can confidently say that I'm at a point I can move on from my first soap. I persevered and got a result I'm happy with. Are those bubbles a little wonky? Sure they are, but I'd rather there be one issue with my soap than 5. I also really like the top. I think removing the Majestic Violet dusting was good judgment, and I actually prefer the texture I made on this soap compared to the previous attempt. Weirdly enough, the surface developed a tiny bubble texture while it gelled in the oven. It works perfectly in this case, but that's something I'll take note of in the future. I call this soap the Purple Phoenix, because as much of a dumpster fire my very first soap was, I believe the soap has been reborn and has risen from the ashes. That was a soap journey with the Soap Universe. Thank you for watching. Bubble bye.